Everyone, Nina here. So, you're here because you can't hit infinite. Don't worry, after watching this video, I guarantee you will be able to hit infinite, as long as you actually do the things I tell you to do. I started playing Marvel Snap in November 22 in the Black Panther season, and I've hit infinite every single season since then. One of the worst mistakes people do when they start losing a lot is changing their decks too often. If your goal is to hit infinite, it's best to play one deck really well and pilot that to infinite rather than trying to counter whatever you're facing on ladder. As long as you play a half decent deck, you can take it to infinite. I know people who only play Thanos clogging or Hela discard or Lockjaw to hit infinite every single season. If they can do it, so can you. If you keep playing the same deck, you will soon learn when to snap and when to retreat, what locations are most favorable to you, and what opponent decks you can and cannot beat. Arguably, this used to be a lot easier before the Loki season. Cards like Loki, Alioth, Elsa, and Nico Minoru have brought a lot more RNG to the game, and it's become a little bit harder to predict when you have an upper hand, especially if you're having a mirror match and a lot of the game depends on who drew better or who got better cards with Loki. But you can still play decks like Lockjaw or Discard, where it's incredibly easy to tell whether you've drawn your winning combination early on. Another mistake people do when climbing is not retreating enough. Marvel Snap is quite unique when it comes to card games because of the cube gambling system. If you always lose 1 or 2 cubes but win 4 or 8 cubes, you will hit infinite in no time. Of course, that is easier said than done, but it all comes down to evaluating games accurately. Don't be afraid to snap if you have a good opening hand and the locations are favorable to you. I know there are people who snap super early, like Lambi, before they even see all 3 locations sometimes, since the more information you have, the more information your opponent will have. So sometimes it's best to snap early and force them to commit to more cubes early on. There are also players who pretty much never snap until turn 3, once all 3 locations have been revealed. These are the safe players, and I count myself as one of them. There is no worse feeling than snapping early because you have a good hand and then getting a 3rd location that completely messes up your deck. Going back to not retreating enough, I've seen a lot of players, myself included, stay in games where they're not supposed to simply because they're curious about what their opponent is playing, or maybe they think the opponent doesn't have the counter they actually have. If your opponent snaps early, try to objectively evaluate your hand and locations before deciding on whether to stay or not. Why did they snap? Are they playing Destroy and they just got a really good Destroy location? Are they playing on reveals and Kamar-Taj just popped up? Or maybe your opponent snapped because a location that's unfavorable to you just popped up, like Fisk Tower if you're playing a move, or Wakanda where you played your Wolverine. A lot of the time when your opponent snaps, it's because they have a good opening hand or locations, and if your opening hand is not ideal, it's best to retreat if your goal is to climb to infinite as fast as possible. It might not be the most fun way to play, but it is effective. Speaking of snapping, I want to talk about a big pet peeve of mine when it comes to Marvel Snap, and that is boomer snapping, aka snapping on last turn. A lot of people wait until the last turn to snap, and it amazes me how many people actually stay in and lose 4 cubes rather than just retreating for 1. Usually these people will know that they won 100% and the board state will also reflect that, and are just being greedy to try and scam more cubes from you. I try to never stay in these instances unless I know 100% I can beat whatever they're about to play. With Alive in the game, it's now easier than ever to tell whether you're about to lose the game on turn 6. And try not to boomer snap yourself, because most of the time, people will just retreat even if they were originally going to stay in the game, and you end up earning half the cubes. Not knowing the meta is another reason why you might be finding it hard to get to infinite. I play this game a lot, and most of the time I can recognize the deck my opponent is playing, unless it's some super weird deck they've cooked to farm boosters or to meme around with. Sadly, with the introduction of the post-infinite leaderboard, I see this less and less, only really in Proving Grounds in Conquest. Knowing the meta and popular decks is essential to climbing ranks effectively, because it will allow you to anticipate the cards your opponent will play, therefore letting you to make more informed decisions when it comes to snapping or retreating, or playing your own cards. For example, if you know a particular deck runs Shang-Chi, you try to avoid playing 9 or more power cards. If you know your opponent is playing Hela discard, you can try to Cosmo or Live the Hela location. If you're facing a Loki deck and they've played their Collector and snapped on turn 4, you know they're about to play Loki, so you can either try to counter them by playing Cosmo if you have priority, or if you don't think you can beat them, it's best to probably retreat for 1 cube, unless you're specifically playing an anti-Loki deck like Phoenix Force or C2. Knowing your opponent's decks and win conditions is what's really going to accelerate your climb to infinite. Not recognizing bots and farming them is another reason you might be struggling to hit infinite. I haven't noticed any bots post-infinite in a while, but pre-infinite, there are still tons of bots that you can farm for 8 cubes if your goal is to hit infinite as fast as possible. I made a video on how to recognize bots a while ago, and all those points still apply. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. In short, Marvel Snap developers added a bunch of bots to the game for a variety of reasons. Early on, to help people win and earn cubes and feel good about themselves, and later on, when your MMR is higher, to take you down a peg. I don't actually know if that's the reason for the cheating bots, but it does seem like that sometimes. So there are 2 or 3 types of bots you can face on ladder. The first 2 are very easy to beat. One will actively play in a way to let you win. You face these when your rank is low and the game wants you to win. Another one will play relatively normally, but it'll still be quite easy to beat, especially if you play a deck that lets you play behind in power, like Patriot, Bounce, or Darkhawk. But the third kind of bot is the most hateful one. It's the cheating bot, and it will do everything in its power to beat you. And because the bots have the Daredevil ability every single turn, aka they will see the cards you've played and where you played them before making their play. So it's very easy for them to win. With these kind of bots, you either have to make sure that you 100% can win, which in a lot of time will actually result in the bot retreating, just very frustrating, or you might just have to retreat against them, especially if it's a 50-50. Say if there are 2 locations up for grabs and it's a 50-50 between where your opponent plays the card, the bot will always make the winning play. With all the bots, the best way to earn 8 cubes is to make sure you're losing the board by turns 4, 5, or 6, which will usually make the bot snap. And once they snap, you can snap back and get your 8 cubes. But again, make sure that you can actually win when you're doing that. I've lost plenty of 4 to 8 cubers to cheating bots, and it feels pretty bad. Another mistake that a lot of people make and might not think of when trying to climb is playing too fast and not thinking their plays through. I make this mistake quite often myself because I'm an impatient person and I don't want to sit there for 2 minutes thinking about every single turn. But it's definitely bitten me in the ass before, because a lot of the time I make a play and then hit end turn and realize that I either misplayed or there was a better play I could have made. It actually happens more off stream, because on stream I try to talk through my plays, and that usually means I spend more time thinking about them. Playing too fast can also make you lose cubes if your opponent decides to snap after you've hit end turn. There still isn't an automatic undo end turn where your opponent snaps, which in my opinion is very unfortunate. A lot of the times when your opponent snaps, it gives you extra information about their hand or what they played. Maybe they drew their Hela, maybe they have Shang-Chi to deal with your big card. Do they have the exact counter to your deck? A snap in this situation is usually very telling. If you had already played your cards and ended your turn, there is nothing you can do but either retreat or stay and hope for the best. Actually, the most optimal way to play snap is to wait until the end of every single turn before ending your turn. Because of this exact scenario, it is very toxic and not very fun for either player. You can also abuse this feature yourself if you want to farm your opponent for extra cubes. The turn you want to snap, wait until the very last few seconds to snap. It is more likely that your opponent had ended the turn already and locked in their play, and they'll be forced to either stay without changing the play or to retreat. This is a very toxic way to play though, and I do not encourage it unless you're playing in some high-stake tournament. If you follow my advice in this video, you should find it easier to hit infinite. Another tip is to watch good players play, and not just on YouTube where it's mostly highlight games, but also live on either Twitch or on YouTube. Sometimes you can learn a lot more by watching a losing game game rather than a winning game. And remember, your rank does not define you as a player. Hitting infinite is nice and all you get is a card back you're probably never going to use, and you'll end up facing a bunch of sweaty tryhards trying to climb the infinite leaderboard. If you found this video helpful, please consider leaving a like or a comment, and of course subscribe to my channel. And if you have any climbing tips of your own, I would love to hear them in the comments. And I'll see you next time. Bye!